Now, Australia's leaders tell us we are flattening the curve on coronavirus with only 53 new cases nationally overnight.
The rate of increase in new cases has been below 1% for 7 consecutive days now, and that's an important national achievement. What it means is we now have a sustained and genuine flattening of the curve.
Prime Minister Scott Morrison says restrictions could begin to be lifted in 4 weeks, although what new liberties we will be entitled to will be different for each state. Joining me now is New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet in Sydney. Treasurer, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Sharri.
Now, there's been heated debate around the restrictions and whether they have been unnecessarily cruelled our economy. Do you think that it is time they were eased?
Look, I'd certainly like to see the restrictions eased, Sharri, but only in circumstances where public health is protected. And I'd much prefer to be in a situation, as you saw there with Greg Hunt, where from a health perspective we're doing quite well, to then be in a position to ease restrictions down the line. Now, I know that it just hasn't been government restrictions that have helped flatten the curve. I think people right across New South Wales, right across the country, have made enormous sacrifices in practising social distancing. The more that occurs, the more the curve is flattened, and then I'd hopefully like to see off the back of that some of those restrictions eased and our economy opened up.
Are you of the view that some of the social consequences of the shutdown, the rise in unemployment, mental illness, depression and the greater risk of suicide, do you think these social impacts have been equally as serious as the coronavirus itself?
Well, I think they're dealt with as serious as the coronavirus, Sharri, and I know from our health officials here in New South Wales there is constant discussion around some of the other social implications that occur through isolation and some of the restrictions that are in place. But most importantly, any government needs to make sure it looks after the health care of their citizens. That's what we've done in our state. That's what other jurisdictions have done as well. And that puts us in a much better position, I think, now to assess where we sit today and how we can hopefully ease some of these restrictions in a way that doesn't jeopardise public health.
How have you felt personally about these restrictions? You know, you are a Conservative politician. Have they sat easily with you?
Oh, no, they haven't. And probably like most people across our country, it's a challenge and, you know, I probably don't like them as much as the next person, but this is a unprecedented situation and like any government, we need to make sure that we protect public health first and foremost. And that means we probably got to give up a little bit of liberty on the way through to make sure that's the case. Then we should do it. But having said that, given the success and given it's not, I just make this point, it's not governments that have been the solution here. The public have come on board and are very much practising social distancing. And the more that occurs, the greater the opportunity that provides for governments, including New South Wales, to relax these restrictions and open up as much of our economy as possible.
You don't think they've gone too far?
Well, I'd much prefer, Sharri, to be on our side than in a situation that we see around the world in places like New York, in places like Italy, where their health response has not been where it should be. And so from where we sit in our state, I think we are in a good position. Would I like to see these restrictions relaxed? Yes, I would, but in a way that ensures public safety and the way that the public have responded to date. The way that curve is flattening, I think, as the Premier has said, we can visit these things on a month-by-month basis.
When you say you would like to see them eased, is that something you're pushing for in conversations with the Premier?
Well, obviously, as Treasurer of the state, and she would agree with this point as well, we want as much of the economy opened as possible. Our Treasury officials work very closely with our health officials to make sure we have the right balance in place. And in where we can actually relax some of these restrictions over time that doesn't jeopardise the public health of people across our state, we will do that. It needs to be done in a balanced way, in a measured way. This is not just a sprint, it's a marathon, and it's going to take some time over the next 6 months. And we need to make sure that we get the balance right, that ensures our people are safe. But at the same time, to your earlier point, that we don't have other unintended consequences downstream that can come from having some of these restrictions in place.
Look, the expectation I think now is that in 4 weeks' time, life will return to some sort of normalcy. But my understanding is that there's actually going to be very minimal changes in New South Wales in mid-May. Are you actually looking at lifting any restrictions in 4 weeks' time other than encouraging a return to school?
We haven't made any decisions in relation to that. What we have said is that we will constantly assess the situation here in our state. I'm very pleased to see that that curve has been flattening. The Premier has made comments in relation to schools, which I understand will be announced shortly, and we want to make sure that we have as many kids safe as possible. So we'll have some decisions shortly to be announced in that space. And as I said, what you don't want to have here is a running set of announcements where governments are providing more confusion in the community.
Sure, but just to manage expectations, people shouldn't be expecting to return to a restaurant or cafe in 4 weeks' time.
Well, I wouldn't think so, Sharri. I think what we are working on is making sure that on a month-by-month basis we assess the situation in our state, and in circumstances where the health measures are taking effect and social distancing is working, in those circumstances that provides the government with an opportunity to relax some of those restrictions. We're working with our state and federal counterparts in relation to what they may be, but here in our state, we'll make sure that where we can lift those restrictions, we will. But as I said, that will be in circumstances where the health of our citizens and their welfare is not compromised.
I think one of the things that has been really frustrating for a lot of people, particularly in New South Wales and in Victoria, is where they can't even go for a walk on their own or sit in a park by themselves, to read a book or just sit down when they're practising sensible social distancing. Is this something that you will look to address?
Yeah, well, look, this is a common sense test. I mean, you can't legislate for common sense, Sharri, but I mean, I'm out and about today. There's a lot of people walking around and keeping social distance. I think that's a positive thing. And I think in the main, most Australians, and people in New South Wales as well, have been exercising, have been going on walks, have been doing things in a way that is safe. And the more that we can practice social distancing while living our lives, that's going to provide us with an opportunity to relax some of these restrictions. And I think to date, our success rate has been very positive, and that's a credit to everybody across our state. Should there be common sense in terms of some of these measures? Yes, there should, and I think you'll see some further relaxing of these restrictions as that curve continues to flatten.
Yeah. Now, look, to the airline industry, Queensland has offered Virgin $200 million. Are you considering giving Virgin any financial support?
Well, from the outset, I would say that New South Wales, like Queensland and the federal government, has a strong interest in making sure we have a competitive airline industry in Australia. We have a very remote land and we rely on domestic tourism, and I think that needs to maintain. We need to maintain that to be the case. Now, obviously, Queensland, we've been in significant discussions over time with Virgin, and we are still in discussions with them. I've always held the view that Virgin should have their headquarters for both Virgin and Tiger in Sydney, as we are the truly global city and Australia's gateway to the world. We will continue those discussions with them, but any decision that we make from a financial perspective would have to go to our cabinet, and it would be one that was made in the best interest of the taxpayers of our state.
Well, during the discussions that you say you've had with Virgin, would that be having their headquarters of Virgin and Tiger in New South Wales, in Sydney, would that be a determining factor into whether you'd give them financial support?
Well, I'd always be open for more jobs in Sydney, and if Virgin were to consider being a tenant, the aerotropolis in Western Sydney, as that second airport comes online, that would be a very positive thing. I've raised that with Virgin over time, and it's obviously part of the discussions that we're having at the moment. But once again, any decision that we make in relation to providing financial support would need to be in the best interest of the taxpayers of our state. It would not be uncommon for governments, as Queensland have come out and said, to be engaged in this space, because it's not like you're propping up a company that has failed because of poor financial management. it has struggled due to the pandemic and through issues outside their control through government orders that have been put in place. So obviously I think governments have a much greater interest in that, and not just in supporting Virgin through this time, but making sure we have a competitive airline industry in New South Wales and nationally. But obviously if Virgin...
Has Virgin been open to that suggestion of moving to the Western Sydney airport site?
Well, they have in discussions that we've had over time, but I'm not going to get into some of the private discussions we've had recently. But
and any dollar figures that you're working with at the moment? I mean, Queensland has put forward that $200 million figure.
Yeah, and look, that's a matter for Queensland. What I'd say, Sharri, is that if I'm, as Treasurer of New South Wales, I'm always open for businesses right across the country to relocate to New South Wales and create jobs here in our state. And I think particularly if you look at the aerotropolis here in Western Sydney, that provides a significant opportunity for Virgin and other airlines to relocate to our state.
Would you consider taking an equity in the airline, or would the money be given on a debt basis?
Look, Sharri, I wouldn't want to get into those discussions. What I'd say is that we have had constructive negotiations with Virgin at this time. If there is a decision to be made that allows for a competitive airline industry in our state, in our nation, but is also in the interest of taxpayers of New South Wales, then definitely our government would consider it.
Treasurer, I really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sharri.
And there was some breaking news there. So New South Wales, the New South Wales Treasurer Dominic Perrottet just confirmed that he is in discussions with Virgin about giving the airline some financial support to ensure that it is a future player in Australia. So Qantas is not the monopoly airline, but it would have to have its headquarters of both Virgin and Tiger at the Western Sydney airport site.